After 7 years, I cut ties with my father after he told me to prove I'm not a shitty child. His words shattered me. I never looked back. Approximately 7 years ago, an event occurred that has lingered in my mind. Although I only saw him briefly at a funeral 2 years back, I still grapple with feelings of doubt and guilt stemming from this narrative. I am uncertain why I feel compelled to write this. Perhaps I just need an outside perspective and a chance to vent. For context, at the time, I was 21 years old, and my parents had finalized their separation when I was 7. They maintained a civil relationship to share parenting responsibilities. Before moving out for college, I resided with my mother and visited my father on 2 weekends each month, as well as for half of the holidays. Since childhood, I have struggled with severe social anxiety, which persists though I am improving, extremely low self-esteem, fear of judgment, and feelings of inadequacy. Since my pre-teen years, connecting with him proved challenging, and I constantly felt the pressure to make him proud. There was tension in our relationship because he disapproved of my academic and career choices. At that point, I held a diploma in social sciences and had just completed a year studying philosophy in college. I recognized it might be a path with limited prospects, but the thought of entering the workforce filled me with anxiety, and college felt like a refuge. I excelled academically, while work felt daunting, allowing me to procrastinate my transition into the working world. My only job experiences consisted of 2 brief summer positions. Feeling guilty about my lack of experience, I resolved that this would be my last year in school, and I would push myself to secure employment. In my country, individuals with low or no income can receive financial aid from the state to attend public colleges, and I depended largely on this assistance. The drama as summer approached and college concluded, I was at my mother's house, feeling optimistic after securing a summer job. I hadn't yet informed my father, as I was awaiting confirmation, but I was fairly confident it would work out. On that same day, my dad contacted my mother to discuss my future. He was quite aggressive, complaining about me taking advantage of his financial support, labeling me as lazy, and essentially accusing my mother of being foolish. He even remarked that my dog would die and called it futile to continue treating her. She was unwell at the time, but not at the point of dying. His comment struck me as irrelevant and unnecessarily cruel. He had always loved the dog and had contributed nothing to her care. At least he refrained from mentioning my grandfather, who was also gravely ill at that time. Ultimately, my mom relayed his words to me. I overheard part of the conversation from the next room and trusted her portrayal of the rest. While I had long sensed unspoken tension regarding my life decisions, this outburst felt entirely unexpected, as he had never broached the topic before, and our last interaction had been typical. Regarding finances when I began college, he discussed with my mother the decision to continue providing the child support he used to allocate to her, which, by the way, was less than the amount the court mandated, and my mother never pursued further, as she was facing financial struggles and he had a stable income. I never requested anything, and I could have managed solely on my student allowance, but they both insisted. His call left me feeling confused, frightened, and angry, primarily due to his rude treatment of my mother and his apparent need to lay blame on her for my life choices. But above all, I felt rejected. It confirmed my worst fears. I sent him an honest message, apologizing for being a disappointment and acknowledging that I knew I did not measure up to others my age. I understood why he hesitated to provide financial aid, and even before he contacted my mother, I planned to ask him to cease payments, as the lack of independence made me uncomfortable, and I truly wanted to find a job. I expressed that I was doing my best despite battling mental health issues. I closed my message with something like, "Best wishes," implying that we would not meet again, which was a mistake made under an overwhelming wave of anxiety and emotion, thinking it was what he desired. In his response, he appeared hurt by my parting words. I tried to clarify things, but he stated he preferred to avoid discussing matters through text, so I proposed that we call each other the following day. The call was lengthy, interrupted by poor reception, and since this narrative is already lengthy, I will focus on the essential details. He insisted that my mother distorted his words and accused her of steering me toward failure. He claimed he never had a say in significant aspects of my life. despite me recalling instances where I had to seek his permission to color my hair, and he was unhappy about financing my dead-end studies. He expressed hurt regarding my best wishes comment, and despite explaining why I had said it, he struggled to move past it, though we continued our conversation. I asked why he would speak to my mother rather than me, as I was an adult, and it should be between us. The money issue was merely the tip of the iceberg, and as anticipated, he had numerous grievances regarding me. He expressed dissatisfaction that I would keep to myself in my room when at his home, that I was not sociable or did not engage in normal hobbies, and that I was not as accomplished as his colleagues' children. He had the audacity to refer to an incident when my cousin initiated a play acting scenario with me, which was not particularly extreme but unsettled me at the time. I was young and frightened, attempting to communicate indirectly to him and my stepmother due to my cousin's presence, but to no avail. Eventually, I confided in my mother about it upon returning home. He blamed me for that as well. I became an emotional wreck, sobbing and frustrated. I apologized and attempted to convey how my mental health impeded my progress, stressing that no one was more disappointed in me than I was. Ultimately, my choices were mine, and while I understood if he chose not to provide financial support, what I really needed from him was emotional backing. I was hurt that his initial reaction to my unconventional career decisions was anger instead of concern. I conveyed my efforts to become a functional individual amid days when thoughts of wanting to die overwhelmed me. His response was, "Yeah, but I need you to prove yourself to me. It is normal for parents to want their child not to fail." Well, that was disheartening. The only point we agreed upon was that our communication was poor, and we both bore responsibility for that. I realized he could not comprehend the larger context, which is why I wished he had talked to me instead of lashing out. It stung because a few weeks earlier, I had finally found the courage to speak with him about my anxiety and the therapy I had begun. I was apprehensive because I had seen him dismiss others due to their mental health struggles in the past. When we discussed this, he appeared receptive, leading me to believe we were making progress. Toward the end of our conversation, he stated, "I am giving you an ultimatum. My door is always open. You can come or not, and I will respect your choice." The discussion felt circular. He was unwilling to compromise or engage in a constructive dialogue. He offered no apologies or expressed regret over anything. Instead, he became defensive, saying, "Oh, so I am a bad father. And what do you want me to beg you?" Admittedly, I was highly emotional, which likely made my tone somewhat accusatory at times, complicating matters further, but I felt it was still reasonable to expect some acknowledgement on certain points. I felt drained and ended up mechanically saying, "Okay, sure," and finally, "Well, goodbye," followed by, "Zoxo." He concluded with, "Zoxo, see you later, I love you, my daughter." It felt like a slap in the face, a joke, an insult. There was nothing affectionate about our exchange. Coldly, I hung up. After the call, I recorded everything I could remember for fear of forgetting, then cried through the night. The following day, I received confirmation of my summer job, and he texted me to inquire about it. I informed him I had secured the position, and he replied that it was good news. Following our earlier conversation, I felt immense fear toward him. I am not entirely sure why, but despite feeling guilty, I could not bring myself to see or speak with him again. Post-drama and additional context afterward, I engaged in considerable reflection, aiming to sort through my thoughts and emotions. I questioned why this transpired, why I felt unable to rectify it, and why I exhibited a fear of him with a flight response when conflict arose. I also engaged in extensive conversations with family members who knew him well. They reminded me that he was a troubled individual who had committed horrible acts. Some aspects I was already aware of, while others I had suppressed or discovered anew. These included trivial matters like throwing my favorite toy on an inaccessible roof without reason, as well as creating unnecessary drama with friends and family. There were also much graver offenses, such as spousal rape, coercing my pregnant mother to walk for hours 2 weeks before giving birth because he arbitrarily decided it was time for her to go into labor, drunkenly assaulting his infant son due to crying, and intentionally running into his ex-partner. There was one instance where he threatened to let a dog fall from the second floor during an argument with one of his girlfriends. The list goes on. His erratic behavior kept everyone anxious. He frequently displayed outbursts and sudden changes of mind, imposing his decisions and canceling plans without explanation. He could be remarkably petty and harsh with others, unable to maintain lasting friendships. Reflecting on it now, I have never witnessed him apologize to anyone. There are valid reasons for my fear of him. Yet, for much of my life, I somehow evaded this darker aspect of his character. In the first 12 years of my life, the only significant incidents I recall involved him forcing me to finish my meal to the point of sickness, and a few mild instances of physical aggression. He is a terrible person, yet he has mostly treated me well and even showed love. I have many cherished memories from my early childhood of him being kind, humorous, and playful, taking me on little adventures, someone I admired. Even as we drifted apart later on, our relationship was not strictly cold. It felt more awkward than anything. I struggle to reconcile these two contrasting images of him. I cannot make sense of it all, and I feel ungrateful for cutting ties so hastily when our first significant conflict arose. For someone like him, being a good father must have presented challenges. Surely he made efforts, held back, and loved me in his own way. I want to believe that must count for something, right? Perhaps he deserves more from me. Conversely, even beyond our personal drama, I am appalled by all he has done, and I felt a sense of relief in cutting off contact. I do not miss him in my life today, yet I am haunted by doubts about whether I acted wrongly. I worry that I have hurt him, and I sometimes find myself wondering about his well-being, hoping he is okay and pondering if he feels lonely, as I have witnessed him during certain low points in his life. I apologize for the lengthy post and any grammatical errors I may have made. What are your thoughts? Please be candid. Story 2. I faced family pressure to abandon my fiancé and accused of ruining my degree. They demand I meet them alone. I refuse. Hello, everyone. I believe I am in need of some shared insights to navigate and endure the situation unfolding between my family and me. This is a lengthy post, but I will strive to be as concise and effective as I can. About myself, I am a 25-year-old female who has been pursuing a biology degree since 2018. The COVID-19 pandemic proved particularly challenging for me, resulting in many setbacks. Unfortunately, my bachelor's program has become outdated, and I am finding it exceptionally difficult to complete my degree because of this. I am coping with severe depression and anxiety related to my academics and received an ADHD diagnosis last year. The reasons behind my mental health struggles are multifaceted. Regardless, I have a wonderful partner who supports me and helps me recognize my own value. We are planning to get married in September, as I had intended to finally finish my bachelor's degree by then. However, I am unable to complete it. I am experiencing a resurgence of depression, and I need another semester. I am currently in therapy. My parents cover my rent, insurance, and provide some pocket money, which totals approximately €780. I earn an additional €400 myself, as living expenses in my area are high. February 7, 2025, the drama began on February 7, which is my grandfather's birthday. My partner and I wanted to send our best wishes since we don't live nearby, and I was unable to celebrate with my family, my parents, brother, and aunt, who visited my grandparents because I had an exam that week. I was not aware of the exact exam date at that time. Despite inquiring with my examination office since the previous November, it has indeed been a challenge, and my university does not make things particularly straightforward. The well-meaning call was short and tense. During this WhatsApp video call, my grandfather expressed disappointment in me, stating that I was no longer as close to the family as I used to be. He also claimed that society and he himself did not approve of my decision to marry my boyfriend, despite our engagement since 2022. When we expressed that our desire to marry was based on love and we did not care about societal expectations regarding right or wrong, he became very aggressive, yelling and slamming his desk. My fiancé quickly ended the call to prevent further escalation. Feeling that the initial call had not been handled well, we opted to call back immediately via landline. My grandmother answered this time. She proceeded to explain why I was a disgrace to the family, primarily because I had not completed my biology degree. I do not even engage in disputes over this with them. I am aware of my shortcomings. She emphasized my significance to the family, while I felt increasingly estranged. I do not often text or call my grandparents, and this time since Christmas, I had indeed not reached out. I find it unbearable. Every time I initiate contact, I hear about my grandmother's recent health scares, and they take pride in not informing anyone else. I am unable to share normal updates, such as a delicious new recipe I tried, because their focus is solely on my perceived lack of measurable success. She urged my partner and I to rethink our marriage plans or even to abandon them entirely. After I pointed out that conversations go both ways, she accused my partner of controlling my every action and insisted that she would only speak with me if he was removed from the conversation. Consequently, she terminated the call. The following Monday night, I received a call from her, but chose not to answer, as I wanted to concentrate on preparing for my exam. Later that evening, my university finally scheduled my exams for Friday, February 14. Instead of answering her call, I sent a message expressing my happiness that she reached out and promising to get back to her soon. By the way, they are aware of my difficulties. I do not try to conceal them. February 12, 2025, on Wednesday morning, I received a text from my mom inquiring about my exams and wishing me luck. I thanked her and provided updates on the situation. Unfortunately, something unexpected occurred in the afternoon. My exam, originally set for Friday, had been rescheduled to Wednesday without my prior knowledge. The examination office had moved it 2 days earlier, and I had missed the notifications sent out 20 hours before. Had I not taken screenshots of the original schedule, I would have been in a very difficult position. The rest of the day was spent trying to resolve this issue, but I could not reach anyone responsible, so I sent an email to everyone involved. February 13, 2025, later that evening, the examination office confirmed that my missed exam would be rescheduled to early April. They assured me that this change would not disadvantage me. I then called my parents to inform them about the situation. They seemed to understand, but since I was now available, they insisted that we meet on Saturday morning to discuss things. They did not specify any details, but made it clear that my partner was not welcome. I reluctantly agreed, as at that point, I simply wanted some peace. February 14, 2025, I decided to call my grandmother back that day since I was uncertain if I would have the energy to do so after my parents finished with me. Given everything that had occurred and the way they usually handle discussions, I anticipated it would not go well. During the call, my grandmother called me characterless, not even in a negative sense, just non-existent, declared me foolish regarding all life matters, and stated that I would never achieve independence. She claimed it was exclusively my fault that my father was now ill, as I had brought disgrace upon the family. She said my degree would always be worthless, just like me, since it had taken over 6 years to complete. Drawing from her life experience, she believed I needed to learn things the hard way, so my thoughts and will had to be fundamentally reshaped. As a result, she declared that I was no longer allowed to communicate with them until this transformation had occurred. In all honesty, I tried to assert myself during that conversation, as I can no longer endure being diminished in such a manner. My thoughts and feelings matter, and if my family truly loves me, they cannot continue to reinforce my worst beliefs about myself. Therefore, I told her that if my presence was the source of my father's stress because of the financial burdens placed upon him, then I do not want his support under such conditions. I also admitted that I was not doing well, yet she dismissed this. In her view, the only one truly unwell is my father, while she perceived me as perfectly healthy, attributing my state to my fiancé's influence. I reminded her of her importance to me and my siblings, my dad and aunt, and expressed how deeply it affected us when she neglected to inform us about emergencies. To summarize, that conversation became a breaking point for me. I felt overwhelmed and frightened, leading me to immediately inform my parents. I opted to use a family group chat that included my dad, mother, and brother. In that group chat, my message since yesterday read, "Hey, good evening. I just spoke to Grandma and Grandpa on the phone. The outcome of our conversation was that they no longer wish to maintain contact with me because my attitudes are too entrenched, and I need to be straightened out before we can discuss things again. For this reason, I have concluded that I cannot and will not visit you alone tomorrow morning. We can only have the conversation if my partner is present. We will arrive by car at 10. Is that okay? My dad replied. Hi, I would prefer to speak with you privately. I don't require your partner for that, I responded. I cannot believe my concerns are being disregarded. My grandparents have made it abundantly clear that they want to shape me. A conversation with just the two of you would align with their wishes. It would be naive of me to agree to this without support. You are two, and I am one. My partner has been a crucial part of my life for 7 years, and I insist on his presence, as I do not feel comfortable having this discussion alone. Additionally, some of the issues at hand directly involve him. If honest and open communication is truly as important to you as we discussed around New Year's Eve, then it should also be possible in his presence. My dad responded, I am very disappointed in your perception of us as your parents. I want to have a conversation with you now and tomorrow. I am uncertain about what alarms you or who you believe is intimidating you. Either you meet with me tomorrow, or you will have to face the consequences of your actions. We love you dearly and hope you will make the right choice. Best wishes, your dad. I replied, Dear Dad, I have clearly stated what I fear. If we wish to discuss the future, I believe we should do so at a different time. Open communication should occur at an equal level, not under pressure or with implicit threats. This conversation can take place another time, but when else? We will continue to stay in touch. Love you all. Today, he keeps insisting that this is merely a routine conversation that must happen today. If I do not attend, he will need to take matters into his own hands. This is the first time I have ever spoken up in this manner and held them accountable for their promises and actions. The situation is deteriorating, and I would sincerely appreciate any honest feedback you could provide. Additionally, my partner and I have never requested any financial assistance related to the wedding. Nevertheless, the following questions now trouble me. 1. Am I overreacting to my grandparents' words, or are their actions genuinely harmful? 2. Is my refusal, setting boundaries, to meet alone making it impossible for my parents to communicate with me, or is it a reasonable reaction considering our past interactions? 3. What should I do next? Story 3. I met my partner's family in Hawaii, and it was super awkward. His dad praised me, but they both clearly dislike our relationship. I felt rejected. There is an abundance of information I could share, but I will try to be concise with a few examples that frequently come to mind. When I initially began dating my partner, he mentioned that his mother would behave oddly and appeared jealous of our relationship. She would even confide in his father about this, which led them to discuss her supposed jealousy among themselves. My partner jokingly referenced it to me, but it concerned me since I want to foster a positive relationship with his family, particularly with his mother, as I consider the prospect of marrying into their family. Over time, as I eventually got added to his parents' contacts, I quickly noticed that his father was very sociable with me, while his mother was not. This did not bother me too much, as our interactions were largely limited to text messages and occasional phone calls. His father invited me to their home for the holidays, but I decided against going because I live quite a distance away, which also drives up the holiday travel costs. Come February, they invited me to Hawaii, and my partner was eager to go since he spent most of his childhood there. He went so far as to purchase my ticket for me. It was hard to decline. I should mention they tease me about being scared of his mother due to the supposed jealousy, so naturally, I feel a bit apprehensive. We arrived and met his father, who seemed kind, but I was anxious as it was late, and everyone was already asleep. Fast forward, I met his mother, but the atmosphere did not feel welcoming. I greeted her and engaged in casual conversation, hoping for a hug, but she seemed somewhat distant. The remainder of the trip was filled with uncomfortable moments where I would share a joke or a story involving my partner, and she would react negatively and walk away. If his father posed a question, and my response included anything related to my partnership in a we context, they would fall silent and stare at me as though I had made an inappropriate comment. I made a concerted effort to dress appropriately and keep the conversation light, yet they consistently regarded me as though I had said or done something offensive. I began to think it was all in my head, but then we went out to dinner. They asked how we met, and I was genuinely excited to share. I was smiling and blushing while giving my account, yet they stared at me blankly, devoid of smiles or warmth. The tension was palpable, and his mother appeared to be struggling to swallow something unpleasant, while his father looked displeased. I fell silent and focused on my meal. On one day, while we were taking pictures, his father said, "Come take a picture with your future father-in-law," which gave me a slight sense of warmth. However, shortly after that, he turned to me, the woman, and inquired about the seriousness of our relationship. I instinctively looked at my partner because I believe such questions are traditionally directed at men in a relationship, and he remained silent. I responded, "He is my heart, and he knows that," to which they essentially conveyed that they do not want us to marry anytime soon or have children. I was taken aback and responded, "Excuse me," but I nodded in acceptance, albeit reluctantly. I later discussed this with my boyfriend, who noted that he disagrees with his father's stance. However, I worry about marrying into a family where I may not feel accepted. Eventually, I brought up the topic with his father, asking if engagements were included in the 4-year timeline they had mentioned. His response was, "Engagement is an American concept," followed by questioning the difference between engagement and simply going to a courthouse or church to get married. I explained my perspective, and he seemed to let the topic drop, inviting me to their home again for the holidays. I politely declined, citing family time as my reason, and he asked if I would go home, to which I replied no, since I do not celebrate many American holidays. He expressed offense, and I suggested a visit for 3 days, which he did not seem to appreciate. This led us to discuss careers, which was arguably the most uncomfortable conversation we had. His father urged me to commit to 20 years of active service, which I respectfully declined. He then, in gentler terms, questioned why people refuse opportunities to become wealthy and choose to be poor instead. I remained silent while he asked if I was interested in HVAC work. I replied no, and when he inquired why, I stated, "It seems like a masculine profession to me," clarifying that this was just my personal view. He then suggested that I consider learning supply, a military occupation, declaring that it could be quite lucrative. Again, I expressed disinterest and awaited his questions about my plans. He asked about my previous job before joining the military. I mentioned that I am currently on military leave and still employed in a civilian government role, prompting surprise from both him and his wife. If they had asked about my post-military plans, they would not have been shocked. He then asked what pay band I was in, and I shared that information, after which he proceeded to research it online, leaving me feeling uneasy. Later, his mother asked if I enjoyed my job. I replied in the affirmative and shared my reasoning, explaining that I initially pursued a medical career but did not succeed due to my weak math skills. Her response was, "So you must have had to achieve a pretty decent score to get into medical then." I laughed it off, but it felt insulting as if she questioned my intelligence. There were several instances while shopping where I mentioned something thoughtful my boyfriend had done for me, and again, she made a sour expression and walked away, causing me to withdraw and feel increasingly uncomfortable. Nothing I said seemed to resonate. His father even pointed out my quietness, and while I did not vocalize it, I wondered why. There were many small rude comments which I tried to brush off as jokes. For instance, a bird flew near us indoors, and I jumped in surprise. His father quipped, "Are you a tweaker?" He also asked me to repeat an entire sentence in his language, and when I requested him to break it down word by word, he seemed to insinuate that I was foolish, which elicited laughter from him and his wife. The trip was quite stressful overall. Additionally, I felt uncomfortable witnessing his mother spoon feed him off her utensils as if he were a child, which I found particularly unsettling. In my upbringing, I was taught never to eat or drink after someone else, so if my family members wanted something to drink, I would fetch a separate cup. My parents emphasized this to avoid germs. I inquired if this spoon-feeding dynamic would be a constant in their relationship, as I prefer to share food and drinks openly, which naturally involves exchanging saliva, and I would prefer not to share my partner's parents' germs. He indicated that this would be the case indefinitely and labeled me as a hater. There are many aspects to unpack here. I've attempted to keep this as brief as possible while providing the necessary context to understand my feelings. Any suggestions on how to handle this situation? Advice? Questions. I shared with my partner that if their behavior continues like this by next February, I will not feel at ease moving forward with marriage or integrating into this family.